Well, as David was saying, it would be difficult for me to live in a place like Chicago or Los Angeles or New York. I just think that would be terrible. Just love living here, but just the problems that those big cities have. What a blessing it is to live here and hear the birds in the morning. I never tell you about that. My wife has this alarm clock that lights up, and it has bird sounds because she's deaf, when she takes her ears out. So, but the light wakes her up, and it comes with bird sounds. And so when we first moved here, I'm like, Mindy, you got to turn your clock off. It's always on every morning. I sleep in. I don't like to get up. Nobody should get up before 8, right? So she's getting up at 6 or whatever to go to work. I don't know what that is all about either, but and so I tell her, and I turned it off, and then it dawns on me those are actually real birds out my window, and so it's just something I'll always remember. I just never heard that where we lived before, but so it is wonderful to live here, and I couldn't imagine being born in a place like Iran and having to live in that regime. We're so blessed in so many ways, and it even says in Acts 17, I want to say, that God chose the exact places where we would live. I think that's a wonderful picture of his love and his sovereignty. Well, if you have your Bibles, we'll look at 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 5. 1,700 years ago, this is 325, and the persecution of the church had ended in just a few years before this, and there was a new sheriff in town. His name is Constantine. And he becomes a Christian, supposedly, at the Nuvian Bridge, where he's going to go to battle because he sees the sign of the cross. And big story, you can read about that online. But when he comes into power and he makes Christianity the religion, he realizes there's a big problem because it's divided. And it's factions. There's two major factions within the church called Arianism, which is the idea by a guy named Arius, who taught that Jesus is not God. He is a different substance than God. And then you had people like Alexander, who taught that Jesus Christ is God. He is fully God. So they had a big debate, and Constantine said, well, you need to get together and solve this. And so in Nicaea, which is, maybe 50 miles southeast of Istanbul in Turkey, they had a big meeting. All the church, all these bishops, which is amazing, is because a lot of these bishops still had scars from the persecution. Some of them had lost eyes, some had lost limbs, some were burned and different things, whipped. And so here is the emperor who's paying all of their trips and their travel and their expenses to come to Nicaea to decide this issue. And he says, I have to have a kingdom that is united. So you will solve this. So that's what the Nicene Creed was about. There's a lot more to that. And the story of Athanasius is something every Christian should know. But that's what they met. And we're not a creedal church. There are creedal churches that base their theology on creeds. Well, we base our theology on the Bible. So I'm not really big on creeds. I know, a lot of them, the Council of Trent, Council of Constantinople, Council of Ephesus, there's a whole bunch of these church councils. And Martin Luther got it right when he says councils err, but the Bible does not. But I say all that, but the Nicene Creed is really cool. You ought to read it. It's not very long, but it clearly represents exactly what we believe. In 325, they said that they came up with the Nicene Creed, and it's a wonderful document. And then, church got messed up, especially after the Council of Trent and stuff like that. But 1,700 years ago this month, and into July, is when they met. And so it's just a little bit of history for you as we get started. So disagreements. There's a lot of disagreements throughout the world, not just in the church, but in politics. We have blue and red states. We have conservative, we have liberals, and medicine. There's the organic-only people, and there's it doesn't really matter what you eat as long as you take these pills, right? You have all these different views on all these different things. And people are often in conflict. Well, today, David is in conflict with his son Absalom, but he's in conflict with more than that. And there's a guy by the name of Shimei that has some not constructive criticism, but some very destructive criticism. And so I want to start by talking about this. And this is 16 verse 5 is where we left off. And we just got done talking about Ziba, and we'll get back to him later because he comes up in another 2 chapters from now. But in chapter 16 verse 5, and I'm going to just start reading this and we'll stop and talk about it. As King David approached Bahurim is a small town that is just beyond the Olivet area. So you have the Kidron Valley, you have Jerusalem, and you have the Hermon Valley, and these valleys make a V. Jerusalem sits in the middle. Then you have the Mount of Olives, the Olivet area, and so this is close to where Bethany is in the New Testament. It's a really small town, but he is walking through that area. And a man from the same clan of Saul's family, we would know that as a Benjamite. Now, that's important. It tells us this for a reason. We talked briefly about this last week, but there are 3 different forces at work. You have David's dynasty, and he's trying to retain power. Absalom, which he's trying to usurp authority of his father, David, and take over and become king. And then you have the Saul dynasty. So the Saul people are hoping that the David people and Absalom people kill each other off, and then they'll move back in and take control. So you have these this tussle for power. So you need to understand that, because this is a Benjamite. This is Saul's family. And so he is actually working probably for a guy named Sheba that we'll get introduced to later. But David approached Bahurim, and a man came from the same family as Saul's family, came out there. His name was Shimei, the son of Gera. Now, we got to talk about that for quite a while, so I'm going to come back to that. Who is this guy? He's a fascinating guy. And he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all of the king's officials with stones. Now, if you look at verse 13, so David and his men continued along the road, while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with, some translations will say dirt, some will say dust, and some will say dung. It's a word that is literally means we would think of as dust, but it's like manure that is just really fine and dusty. You know, if you've ever tried to toss a cow pie, right, a frisbee, a cow pie, well, if they get to a certain point where they get certain age, they don't toss anymore. So this guy is tossing all this stuff down on him. And I don't know where he's getting all of this rocks and dirt and dung. But anyway, so he's pelting David, verse 6, and all the king's officials with stones, though all the troops and the special guard were on David's right and left. So he's probably not hitting David. And I don't think he could get very close to David because of his people around him. So what did he say? As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. Right? He's just saying terrible things about him. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul. You say, what? Okay, now let's list. How many people from Saul's household did David actually kill? Anybody know that number? None. Did he kill even Saul? No. God says, I killed Saul. And it says that in 1 Chronicles. But Saul fell on his sword, remember? Or the other account was that slimy Amalekite came along and killed him because he thought he would get the crown and all that. So you have different accounts of this story, right? But there's no account that says David killed him, right? So who exactly is he killing? He took care of Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth. This is not fair. This is not accurate. It's not true. It's not right. And so for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. Well, God removed Saul, But this guy here, Shimei, he's from the house of Saul, so he wants to regain the throne. So he wants everybody to think that Saul was a good guy. David's a bad guy. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. So you lost it all, he says. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. Now you would think that as you read this, well, he's talking about Bathsheba, he's talking about Uriah the Hittite he killed. That doesn't even come up. And I don't even know how many people really were aware of the sin that he did with all of that. Obviously, many were because Bathsheba came from a prominent family. But you have kind of ruined because you are a murderer. So who did David murder exactly? Well, Uriah. Who else did he murder? Well, that was a battle, right? So if you go to war, you're not murdering, you're killing, right? So that's a little bit different. But yeah, he killed 200 Philistines and cut off their foreskin. So he did a lot of killing. But did he actually murder anyone he wasn't at war with? No, that would be murder. By the way, the Ten Commandments, does this say kill or murder? Anybody know? Was it thou shalt not? It says murder. Yes, it does. It says you shall not murder, wanton taking of life. Because God commanded many places in the Bible to kill, like all the Amalekites. Wipe out, destroy all the Amalekites, right? Well, how could God say that if there was a Ten Commandment that says don't kill? The people quote that wrong. And so I remember when I was a chaplain, we'd get these conscientious objectors, and there was a process they had to work through. And as they were getting deployed or whatever, they'd be conscientious objectors and say, well, they don't want to leave, they don't want to deploy or whatever, they don't want to go to war. And so one of the steps was you have to have an interview with the chaplain. So one of the things we'd ask them is, why do you get the idea that it would be wrong to serve your country and kill the enemies of your country? Well, the Bible says, do not kill. So I would take them to that verse and I would say, really, is that what it says? And I'd take them to a translation I knew what was more accurate there and say, do not murder. And he said, okay, well, that's a difference of opinion, I guess. But let me ask you a question. If you're sleeping in your bed next to your wife, and somebody breaks into your house, grabs your children, and threatens them with a gun and ties them up and says they're going to shoot your wife if you don't give them all the money that you have. Well, would you grab a gun? Would you try to defend your family at all? Oh, yeah. Well, then that's the same thing. You're defending your nation. You're defending your family. You're not a conscientious objector, because they would not pick up a weapon to defend anything because they object to violence. And so I'd write that in my little notes, send it on to the commander, and they would say, nope, you're going to war. Anyway, so, so Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over there and cut off his head. Right? This guy is great. This is out of order, but I'm going to talk about him first, I think, because I think he is great. Abishai. Abishai is the brother of Joab, David's general. And this guy, every time he appears in the Bible, for the most part, he's killing somebody. Right? So I want to walk through that really quickly because this is great. This guy is awesome. So he says here, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over there and cut off his head. It won't take me but a second, right? Look back at 1 Samuel 26. 1 Samuel 26. And this is verse, we'll look at verses 6 through 12. So David has discovered where Saul is, and so he set out, I'll start in verse 5. Then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw Saul and Abner. Abner was a general for Saul, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. Okay, well, David's not going to get two of them, right? Well, look what happens. David then asked Ahimelech, the Hittite, Abishai, that's the Abishai we're talking about, Zeruiah, Joab's brother, who will go down into the camp with me to Saul? I'll go with you, Abishai said. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner and the soldiers were lying around him. Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now, let me go pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I'll be right back. It won't take but a second. I don't even have to hit him twice." This guy just wants to kill everybody, right? I mean, this guy, it only take me one time. We'll wipe him out, be done with this, right? David says, "No, don't destroy him. And who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless?" And so that's the first time we run into him. But there's more, so we got to talk about the next time. Turn to 2 Samuel 30. 2 Samuel 3:30. And he's in this one here. 2 Samuel 3:30. And so, just a short little verse here. And I'm on chapter 4. They took 3 out. Oh, there it is. Okay. So it says, Joab and his brother Abishai murdered Abner. So we thought it was just Joab. You read the story, and Joab is the only one mentioned. But here in this parenthetical statement, we find, Abishai was there. Well, we would expect that he would be. So him and his brother killed Abner because he had killed their brother Asahel in the Battle of Gibeon. So he killed him. I'm going to kill this. Abishai is involved in the murder of Abner, Saul's general. Okay, but that's not all. This guy's got quite a record here. Go to 2 Samuel 21:16, and we're getting there because this isn't. This is a little bit further down the road, but this is 2 Samuel 21:16 through 17, and Ishbenab, one of the descendants of Raphi, whose 16, whose bronze spear weighed 300 shekels. This guy is one of the, so Goliath had 4 brothers. So why did David pick 5 stones? Because he didn't know if he was going to have to kill all of his brothers too, right? So this is talking about one of the deaths. Well, go back to the 15. I think it talks about that. Once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel. David went down with his men to fight against the Philistines, and he became exhausted. He just got tired of killing people, right? And Ishbenab, one of the descendants of Rapha, whose bronze spear weighed 300 shekels, that's a lot. That's like 7 pounds or whatever. And he was armed with a new sword. So he said he would kill David, but enter Abishai. He came to David's rescue. He struck the Philistine down and killed him. So again, he's just killing this really big guy. He's a giant. And so he's doing a lot of killing. Look at chapter 23, verse 18. These are toward the end of David's life. Now we'll get into this when we get to there because there's interesting things with this. But 23:18, and it's talking about David's mighty men. Verse 18, Abishai, brother of Joab, son of Zeruiah, was chief of the 3. We'll talk about who these 3 are and everything. He raised his spear against 300 men whom he killed. And so he became as famous as the 3 Musketeers. There's 3 guys that were great warriors for David. And he became as great as those 3, but he wasn't one of the 3 is what it's saying. How many people did he kill? 300. I mean, that's Samson territory there. I mean, that's pretty remarkable, right? But you think that's something? Turn over to 1 Chronicles 18:12. I mean, this is an amazing guy. I mean, I hope you're getting a sense of this guy is not one you want to mess with. All right? So, the Spirit came on Abishai, chief of the 30. He says, "We are yours, David. We are with you, son of Jesse. Success to you and success to those who help you, for your God will help you." And he goes on. This is verse 12. I'm actually 18. I'm sorry, I went too far. I said 12, probably, didn't I? 12. I'm in 1 Chronicles. Listen, I'm in the wrong chapter. It doesn't help when you read the wrong chapter, does it? 18:12. There it is. Abishai, son of Zeruiah, struck down how many? 18,000 Edomites in the Valley of Salt. That's in the Dead Sea. So 18th. Now, he probably didn't kill them all, but his army probably did, and he probably killed several hundred himself. So this guy, he's not one you want to mess with. And so he says, look, I can do this. I can just, it won't take but a second. I'll just go kill this guy, right? And he's one of David's mighty men, and he is an important person in many ways. But when you get to David comes back, I didn't write that verse down, I don't think. David comes back, and it's in 18, I want to say. And David comes, and so Shimei comes out to greet him and says, I am so sorry. I never should have done this. What was I thinking? How come I didn't stand with you? You know, I know that you are king. I will honor you and everything. Abishai says, well, shouldn't I just kill him now? And so he does that again. It's in chapter 19, as right there around verse 19. Verse 21. Then Abishai, this is 2 Samuel 19:21. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed. All right? Why shouldn't we just kill him? Let's just kill him. I want to kill him. He really wants to kill this guy, right? Over and over. So Abishai, I want you to get the sense of this guy, right? He is the Arnold Schwarzenegger of the Old Testament, if there is one. He is that guy. I mean, he's a big guy. He reminds me of Benaiah. Do you remember who he was? He's the guy that slain the lion. It says that he slain the lion with his bare hands. And that's all we know from the Bible. But it's interesting because, how I quote a lot from the Talmud. It's not the Bible, and I get that. It's just Jewish writings about the history, And I don't know, you never know if it's true or not. But they said that David is sitting, and it's in time when kings go off to war. It's in the winter, and there was snow in Jerusalem, which sometimes happens. And they're having a war planning meeting with David and his generals, and Benaiah is there. And all of a sudden, somebody comes in and reports that a lion has entered the city and has fallen into the grain silo. And what do we do? And so Benaiah says, I'll just take care of it. I'll be right back. And so he goes out, he jumps into the grain silo, kills the lion, drags the body out of the silo, and then goes back to the meeting. He's probably got a few scratches on him, sits down and said, okay, now where were we at with the Philistines again? Yeah, that's what the Talmud, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it is. It's amazing feats of these people. But so, Abishai, why should a dead dog like this curse the king? Let me go over there, cut his head off. Right? There's nothing to it. It's a quick thing. It's like putting butter on bread. But then the king says, what does this have to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? If he is cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David, who can ask why do this? David then said to Abishai and his officials, my son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamite? It's nothing to me. I've got a son that's trying to kill me. That's more important to me. I don't care about this Benjamite. Leave him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. For maybe the Lord has told him to. And maybe that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore me to his covenant blessings instead of his curse today. This is interesting because we all know that constructive criticism that is given by a heart that wants positive change, right? Somebody who cares about, like, say, a church, and they see something that's wrong, so they want to give constructive criticism, and they love their church, but so often it's a threat, right? And so, but it's an invaluable resource to those who will accept it. But so many times when we hear criticism, we react against it, right? We want to justify, we want to excuse, we want to explain, rather than saying, what are they trying to say? What is the concern that's happening here? Are they right in saying it? And you get the sense that's what David is doing. Well, maybe he's right. David, is realizing, and we'll see this in a little bit, that all of this is because of his sin with Bathsheba. So he's already feeling terrible about all this, and he'll recognize this in a little bit. But he's thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe this is what I deserve. Maybe this is from God. So he's allowing this criticism to happen. And then we'll fast forward a little bit here, because I want you to get the sense of this guy. So he doesn't have Abishai kill him. Twice Abishai wants to kill him, right? Twice David says no. But if you look at was it 1 Kings? Go to 1 Kings. Once David is on his deathbed, and he's giving final instructions to Solomon. And in 1 Kings chapter 2, he has three people that he wants to talk about. And verses 5, it starts kind of here. He says he's giving instructions to Solomon. He says, now you yourself know that Joab, that's his general, he relieved him of duty at least twice. And then he got his commission back and was a general again because David needed him at different times. But he was fiercely loyal to David and did so many wrong things because of that loyalty. But you yourself know what Joab, the son of Zeruiah, did to me. What did he do? Joab is the one that killed Absalom. Okay, we'll get to that in a little bit here. But what did he do to the commanders of Israel's army? Abner, the son of Ner, and Amasa. He killed Abner's son. He killed Amasa. Amasa was a general that, as we'll read in a few minutes, or maybe next week, he was a general that Absalom appointed to lead his army against David. After the war, he sides with David, and David appoints him as general. And so it's an interesting story related to his life, and we'll get to that. He killed them, shedding the blood in peacetime, as if in battle. There's your distinction between war and with that blood, he stained the belt around his waist and the sandals on his feet. He's covered in blood. His life is covered in blood. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. You need to kill him. That's what he's telling Solomon. All right, Solomon, if you want to have a long reign, you need to kill Joab. One down. Let's go on to the next one. But show kindness to the sons of Berizai of Gilead. We'll get to him soon too. He did a lot of kindness for David when David was on the run, and so show kindness to them. Let him eat at your table. Be nice to him. They stood by me when I fled from your brother Absalom. And then one more person. Guess who this is? Shimei. And remember, you have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Buram, who called down bitter curses on the day I went to Menahem, which means two camps, and it's where Jacob met God before Esau. He had to wrestle with God. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord, I will not put you to death by the sword. He made a covenant that he will not kill him, but I want you to kill him for me. That's what he says. But now do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. And then he dies. So three people he talks about. So Shimei is one of them. What's really interesting is Shimei, the son of Gera, was saved twice by David's hand. And it wasn't until many years later that he told Solomon to kill him. Why would that be? There's a lot written about this in theological journals. A lot written about this that Bible scholars have debated. One is related specifically to the whole issue of the book of Esther. So what's the book of Esther about? Let's back up. When they were coming back from their captivity, Babylon took them captive. The Medo-Persian Empire conquered Babylon. Cyrus issues a decree in 473 to come back to the land. Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, all those guys come back to the land, and they come in three waves. But how many Israelites living in Persia at the time do you think actually returned to Israel? Anybody have any ideas? What percentage would you say? Anybody know? No. Most estimates hang right around 20%. 80% of the Israelites that were taken captive by Babylon, and they decided to stay in Persia. Only 20% came back. That may be even a little high. Some estimates are between 10 and 15%. So what happened? Well, the book of Esther is about those 80% that stayed behind. That's what the book of Esther is about. So what happened to them? Well, Esther tells a story of what happened to those who stayed. So most people don't know that. I don't know why most people don't know that. But Esther is about those people. And so what is Esther about? Esther is a contest between two men of authority of God or the authority of the state. It's between Mordecai and Haman. Haman, or Haman, however you want to say it. Mordecai is a Jewish person who refuses to worship the king, to do any feast or sacrifices or any of that. He is a very committed Jewish person. Who is this Mordecai? Turn to Esther. Esther is the last book of the Bible. You say, well, I've got more than that. No, you don't. The history of Israel ends with Esther. All of the minor prophets, all of the Psalms of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, all those books fit back into before the period of Esther. All right, so just so it's arranged historically, and it's arranged prophetically, or I should say the Psalter, Psalms and wisdom literature, and then it has the prophets at the end. So, but if you look at this guy, we know that he is the son of Gera, and so we talked about the charge of David to Solomon. Look at Esther chapter 2, verse 5 and 6. Introducing the characters here, who's all involved. Chapter 2, verse 5. Now, there was in the citadel of Susa a Jew from the tribe of Benjamin. Interesting. Shimei was from the tribe of Benjamin, named Mordecai, son of Jair, the son of Shimei. The son of Kish. Who is Kish? Father of Saul. Yeah. So, who had carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And so taken captive with Jehoiakim, who was the last king of Judah. So here he is. He's the... Now what dates it? This is at the time of David. David was about 1,000 years before Christ. When is the captivity? Well, the captivity is around 500 years. Right, or 470, somewhere in that, before Christ. So you have 600 years or thereabouts, right? How 500 years for sure. How is it possible that this could be his son? And where is Gera? So what's going on with this? So Mordecai is a descendant of Shimei, and why does it not say he was a son of Gera? Why does it say he's the son of Jair? Well, Jair is an interesting character. It turns out that at least a half a dozen times in the Bible, and I'll give you an example. Turn to Numbers. Well, let's look at Judges first. Judges 3:15. So stick your finger in Esther. We'll be coming back there and look at Judges 3:15. Kind of jumping all over tonight. Judges 3:15, and this is the second judge, Ehud, and so it says, again, the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, the left-handed man, son of Gerir, the Benjamite. Oh, that's the same name. Shimei, son of Gera, should say. It's the same. But when is this happening now? This is weird. This is in the period of Judges. The period of Judges lasted 390 years until there was a king named Saul appointed. This is the king of David. We're looking at 450 years. Either side, we have 450 to 500 years of this guy. Now let's go back. I want to show you something. Numbers chapter 32:41. This is what you can read a lot of journal articles about people that really get into all of this stuff because they're fascinated. Numbers 32:41. So Jair, a descendant of Manasseh. Okay, this is in Numbers, right? Numbers are in the wilderness. When was Manasseh born? Now, if you're reading the King James, it won't say a descendant. It'll say son of Manasseh. How many of you have son of Manasseh? Yeah, that's a good translation. That's literally what it says. But the NIV, they want to help us out because there's no way this guy here living at the time of the Exodus in the wilderness is a son of Manasseh. Why? Because Manasseh was a son of Joseph in Egypt. And how long were they in Egypt? 400. And he was before the captivity, before they went to be slaves, 450 years again, right? So we have this weird thing going on all through this. But so sometimes the Bible will say son of somebody, and what they're really meaning, it's their great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. But he was famous and popular, so you know who he is, so we'll talk about him being the son of that guy, rather than the immediate person. So when we read in Esther chapter 2, Mordecai, son of Jair, well, we find that name a lot in the Bible. This guy was a popular guy. Son of Shimei. Well, there's a lot of generations between these. And that's how, and if you understand this, you understand why the dating of the Bible based on the number of generations is not really that accurate. So some people have come up with exact years because they add up all the names, and each generation is 40, right? Because it's basically how long it takes for a child to grow up, for to have a son, and that son to have a son, which is about 40 years. So let's just add 40 years for each name we find, and we'll know how old the world is. It doesn't always work that way, because the Bible doesn't care if you know how old the world is. The Bible wants you to know these people that changed the world that we're in. So these are the people that did that. And so now you go to, so I think it's a descendant of the same guy, and that is why David said, don't kill him. Now, any other time, David could have easily said yes, or Abishai might have just did it anyway. But he lives, and he lives another 25 years at least, which would give him time to have many descendants so that he could put Mordecai in the book of Esther as one of his descendants. God had sovereignty. And I think of it as a time travel thing. Have you ever watched a time travel movie? And the question they always ask is, should we be going back in time or not? Because what if we change something and my grandfather is killed because of something I do and I will never live, right? And you have all these conundrums, these paradigm things, and everybody's trying to figure out, the way to do this, but we can travel it on time. I love time travel shows. They're ludicrous, and I get that. That's part of what makes it kind of fun to think about all these things. But if David would have told Abishai, yeah, kill him, just let's get rid of this threat here, and because he's going to end up causing problems later too. But he didn't, because you wouldn't have Mordecai, and you have to have Mordecai to deliver the Jews that are living in Persia after the other ones left. But there's another character. And again, we see God's sovereignty at work. Who is the other character in Esther? Now, I know Esther's a character, but she is a facilitator. And but the focus of the book is really not so much Esther as it is Haman and Mordecai. If you read it, it's about these guys. Look at chapter 3. And it says, after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. Oh, where do we recognize that name from? Yes. God says, utterly destroy the Amalekites, right? Leave not a single one, even all of their sheep and their camels and their donkeys and their cattle, whatever. Kill everything, right? And so what did he do? He left one person alive. And anybody, well, we can look that up. It's I have that written down somewhere here. That verse is in 1 Samuel early on, and we'll get back to 1 Samuel 15, 1 through 9. Let's look at that real quick. 1 Samuel 15. First Samuel 15, 1 through 9. Samuel said to Saul, I, the Lord who sent to anoint you king over the people of Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel when they waylaid them when they came out of Egypt. They would attack they were coming out of Egypt and they had a long train, and the people in the back, the older people and stuff, they would attack from the rear so that the commanders in the front wouldn't know about it. That was their strategy. They'd attack them different places and stuff. Anyway, now go and attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. So Saul summoned the men and mustered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers, 10,000 Judah. Saul went out to the city of Amalek and set an ambush in a ravine. And you read it, and then Saul, verse 7, attacked the Amalekites. Verse 8, he took Agag, the king of the Amalekites, alive, and he never killed him. So here you have, and this morning, in fact, in our Sunday school class, David mentioned, we're talking about how Jacob stole the blessing from Esau by the pot of stew and all that, right? And stuff. And you brought up a point. You said, what would God have done if he didn't muck around with it and do it? Right? I mean, he wasn't the firstborn, but it was prophesied he would be. Obviously, God is going to put Jacob in charge of everything. And yet, what would God have done? Well, we'll never know, because sin entered, and God had to work through the sin issues that people did. But what's amazing is that if you have a Mordecai, if you have a Haman, you have to have a Mordecai. Haman was saved, his family was saved first. His descendants were saved first by Saul. God says, okay, I've got to have a Mordecai now because I have a Haman. And so he had David not kill him. And so it's amazing how all of these pieces work together in God's sovereign plan. And if he would have killed him, either one, if he would have killed Agag, the king Agag, none of this would have happened. But because he didn't, God has plan B. And that's why I think why I said all that to say there was a reason that he kept him alive. And I think it was because he knew what would happen in the future, and he knew that he would need to provide for Israel through Mordecai. So, any thoughts or questions? I know it's a long way to go, but you wouldn't believe the articles and stuff. A lot of people write about it. It's a fascinating thing because it gives us just a little glimpse into the sovereignty of God, how he knows everything. Past, present, future. It's alive to him now. He sees it. We sometimes just don't see God as big as he is. So any thoughts or any questions anybody has about that? I hope they don't think it's a rabbit trail. I think that stuff is really cool. I think it's fascinating. All right, so verse 13. So David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went, throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt, and David does nothing. The king and the people with him arrive at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself. So that's Shimei, and that's kind of what he was doing. I think I want to stop right there because this next section is more involved in a longer section. We'll stop just a few minutes early. So any thoughts, anything anybody has? We got to get into Ahithophel. And like I mentioned before, Ahithophel had a son named Elam. Elam had a daughter named Bathsheba. When we talk about Ahithophel, he is the grandfather of Bathsheba. So when a division comes and David and Absalom are at war, he goes on the Absalom side because he did not like what David did to his little Bathsheba. And so now Absalom killed Ammon because he raped his sister. And Ahithophel sides with Absalom against David because he took little Bathsheba as his wife and killed her husband. It's an interesting dynamic here. Interesting thing. So we got to get into that because he had great advice, but God frustrated it. And it's fascinating how God does this and what works. David has a prayer, and God answers it really quickly, like the same day. So any thoughts and any questions about any of that? Anything I missed that you guys picked up on? Huh? This is toward the end of his reign. Yeah, now I know Second Samuel is very unique amongst all the books of antiquity. So you get to 21, you get to the end of 20, and David is on the throne. Everything is secure. He's moving toward the end of his reign. But you still have 21 all the way through 24. And there are 6 vignettes. There's 6 scenes, 6 stories that fall back into the time that he is ruling earlier. So early on, well, we just read one of them, Abishai, about killing this Philistine. Well, the Philistines are already conquered at this point. So that goes earlier on. And then we have other stories. So there's, what he's doing is, have you ever seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? You seen that movie? You know, at the very end, they're in Bolivia, and they're in this little house, right? And the Bolivian army is surrounding them, and there's smoke everywhere, and they decide they're going to go out. They open the door, and they rush out, but what happens? All of a sudden, they do flashbacks of all of these little scenes throughout the movie that you already saw, and then the thing is over and directed by so-and-so, right? And so at the end, there's a flashback. What makes Samuel so intriguing to literary theologians is the order and structure of the book. You don't see flashbacks in books of antiquity. You just don't, they didn't write that way. But we see that here. It's very innovative. It's very creative. The writer of 2 Samuel, we don't know who it was. It's an unnamed person. Obviously wrote the scripture, and it is true in every word it says. But he wants us to end David's life by seeing all the good things, and so there is a chiastic structure to it. There are two things that happen that mirror the last 2 things that happen, with one thing in between. There's a B, C, and then there's a B, A. And in the telling of those, there's 6 vignettes, but there's 5 relationships, and the same things are in the same side of it. In the middle is Psalm 92, I want to say. It's word for word of one of the Psalms. So it's an amazing structure, and it fits back into his life. It starts early on when he first becomes king, and the issue of the Gibeonites, which we'll read about in the coming weeks, and then it ends when he's doing a census, and he has a terrible, difficult decision to make in both of those stories, and he saves the kingdom in both of those stories. And then, so we'll get into how that's structured. It's a lot of people have written about a lot of that structure. It's quite remarkable, and you see how it was a divine work of inspiration because of how it was organized. Most people don't get that. They think it's telling the story of David's life, but no, it fits back into it. The last story in 2 Samuel is at the end of his life, but the first story in chapter 21 is very early on. So it's like the writer says, I want to give you the high points of his life. And I want to tell you about all the people that were around him, that loved him and served him, these mighty warriors. And I want to give you, in the middle of that, a praise that David wrote, amazing psalm that he wrote glorifying God. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful 4 chapters. So we'll get into that next week. So I did end up on time because I talked too long. Anyway, let's close in prayer. Our gracious Father, we thank you so much for this book. And Lord, how terrible it must have been for David to be walking out of Jerusalem, walking through that valley with dust on his head and sackcloth and barefooted, and having Shimei tossing rocks down on them and cursing them. And Lord, I know if it was me, I probably would have said, Abishai, go do your deed. But Lord, we're so thankful that you knew the beginning from the end, as you always do, as the Alpha and the Omega. You see all things, and you do in our lives as well. Lord, we think that sometimes we're making good decisions, and they may seem good, but it's not in keeping with your purposes and your plans. And so, as David listened to Shimei, thinking perhaps this was you speaking, listening to any criticism, taking it to heart. Lord, we should be listening to others too. We should be able to hear concerns without taking it personal, but but looking and validating the thoughts of other people so that we can be close and draw near to you together as we worship you. In Jesus'